everybody, I'm Mike Belsito, host of Product Unplugged, where we dig into the good, the bad, and sometimes the ugly when it comes to product. I'm really excited for today's episode. Before we get into it, I want to give a thank you to the team at Pendo. Pendo is sponsoring this series, helping make it possible. And of course, Pendo is improving the world's experience with software. They've been doing that for quite some time. Definitely a company and a platform to check out. And again, a big thank you goes to the team at Pendo. But I'm really excited for our guest today and excited to dig in to a story that our guest has for us. And I'm here to first introduce Kasha from the team at Bain Company. Kasha, it's really awesome to have you here with us.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Very nice to speak to you today, and hope that some of the stories that we'll share today will be inspiring for the audience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's fun for everybody to dig into the stories. Sometimes these stories, it's not always a straight line to success. They're the zigs and zags that we all take. And I know that in talking to you in the past, you've experienced that for sure as a product person and a product leader. And maybe we could get right into it. I'm curious if there's ever been a time, speaking of the zigs and zags, when you've had a roadmap that you're working with, but you had to pivot that roadmap for one reason or the other. Maybe we could start there.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe I will start that I work in a product for, I think, 15 years or more even. Time flies very fast. And I remember a couple of moments where the new technology was coming in and then you need to adapt. And sometimes companies are faster, sometimes they're a bit slower or hesitant in doing that. And I think now we all experience this with artificial intelligence, the new ideas, the new solutions, a sprinkle every day. I think we can just blink and then there's 2,000, I don't know, hundreds of new solutions connected with AI. And there is also a question for the companies. Okay, what are you doing with it? Are we one of the first adopters? Are we waiting to see what will be our strategic advantage of this? And again, I think that might be one of the very interesting discussions to have within your companies as well, what to do with artificial intelligence. And I think this is one of the big zigzags that I believe everyone in the industry is facing.
Yeah, I feel like when ChatGPT went live, everybody was forced to zig or to zag. And, AI, obviously it's been around for so long, but it was in the public's face. And so it sort of forced us all to maybe rethink our priorities, rethink our roadmaps. And yeah, so for you, I mean, you kind of alluded to it. It seems like AI maybe introduced that need for change on your end. Can you tell me more about that? Is it something that kind of altered your roadmap? Is it something you had to rethink in terms of the roadmap?
Well, maybe I'll start with more like a general approach to the roadmaps, because I think we all want to be very agile, and everyone in the industry is preaching, yes, outcome-oriented roadmaps, agile, and so on and so forth. And again, in my daily work, we are trying as much as we can to be flexible. And if there's a new opportunity, we try to seize it, because again, this is how we bring the best business value for the organizations we are working for. However, the reality is that sometimes you have some sorts of commitments, and there are things that you need to deliver, and there are plans, and so on and so forth. And I think with the open AI, there's additional angle of uncertainty or across, like, okay, is it going to stay? Is it something like temporary? What are the ethical side? I think now we definitely see, because I think OpenAI was launched in like 2022, so definitely it's here to stay. But there are other AI platforms as well. So I think with all this evolution of multiple options around AI, there's also a natural question, okay, what we're doing to adapt it and to use it potentially for basically enhancing what you are doing on daily basis to bring the best business value possible for the organization. And I think in our case, it was very similar. We were presented with, this exciting new technology. We're saying, okay, we see it. What we can do in order to adopt it? Is there any business problem we're trying to solve now that we can't, but with OpenAI, or basically with the AI, because as well, I don't think we should limit to a particular provider. It would be more possible to like tackle that business need. In my particular case, on the product I was working for, we actually had a couple of challenges that were just very good fit for being solved with artificial intelligence. They were possible to solve in the more traditional ways. However, that would be expensive. What artificial intelligence enabled was more efficient way of getting to the outcome. And again, a bit more experimental as well, because at that time that was more new and unknown territory.
Yeah, maybe you could share a little bit more. What was that product? And yeah, like walk us through when sort of, AI starting to build up. When did it become apparent for you that this could actually have an impact that, maybe you should be changing your thought there?
Yeah, definitely. I think I can't go too much into the details because of the NDAs and stuff that I'm
Sure.
having signed. But in general, I think when it became apparent is like, if you want to be ahead of the game in any industry, you kind of need to observe very closely like what is happening. In my particular case, I can just maybe mention that I work on a data-related product. I think that this is where artificial intelligence is actually very well suited, because if you already have a big amounts of data, and if you add on top of that elements that can mine it more efficiently, that can reason more efficiently to like traditional approach with like, doing the statistical models, having a lot of people to validate the data and so on and so forth, that just brings a lot of potential synergies that can then flourish as a basically good outcome. But when it got particularly apparent was when we just looked through our idea board, which we have usually maintaining with like the things that are like, okay, well, this is cool idea, but we can't really develop it now because I don't know, it's too costly, we don't have the technology, whatever is there. And we looked through that corner to see, okay, can we attack one of these, totally blue sky thinking ideas with artificial intelligence? And the answer was yes. And this is where we went to the stakeholders and say, hey, well, that technology actually enables us to do this, and with the fraction of the price in comparison to if we would do it more traditionally. So this is how the conversation actually started to see, okay, shall we twist our current approach and maybe do this blue sky thinking that we didn't really think that we can even tackle, and just pivot a bit to get it in again, improve the traction, improve the tool, and again get something very, very unique for our product.
Yeah, I'm really curious about is I imagine that kind of shift required a lot of different conversations with different stakeholders, right? There's the client, the customer itself, internal stakeholders, maybe even users. I don't know. Like what are all the different groups that you had to get involved in the process? And what were those conversations like? Because we're still in early days of AI, but especially, probably the time that you're talking about, that's very early days of AI. So uh, I'm curious if there's skepticism, concern. Maybe you could tell me more about the stakeholder conversations you had to have.
Yeah, again, I think I'm very blessed with very open-minded and very intelligent stakeholders who are as well like very excited about bringing, the best for both like the organization and the clients. In my particular angle, or maybe let's start from the beginning, because I think that always when you go to any AI solution is like, okay, legal. Can we use the data that we are storing? Is the data safe? What will happen with the data? And how we can make it safe? And in many organizations that deal with like client data, so more external, actually even internal company data. You don't necessarily want to submit them somewhere in the cloud and hope that no one steals it, right? So I think always in any company, there is a lot of considerations around, okay, how we can utilize this data in a way that is safe. And again, here, artificial intelligence tools usually enables you to have solutions on premise. So your data is there, safe, not anywhere externally, so nothing is shared. And then there is also discussion about, okay, how ethical it is. Is there any breaches possible with using that technology in the angles that, I don't know, we wouldn't like to go with? So I think there is a lot of this discussions that needs to be happen in our organization to make sure that people are so we as in like technical people can answer these questions around legal stuff, ethical stuff, and making sure that all these things are, all the data is secure. And then there's the level of discussion with the business stakeholders as well, saying, okay, well, we checked it, it's definitely secure. This is what would be the benefits. This is what are the risks, because there's also a risk factor around artificial intelligence. We also need to remember that, well, because it is a learning model, we cannot control the outcomes. And a lot of people, I think, forget a little bit about it and say, oh, I don't know, I asked artificial intelligence the same question twice and I got different answer twice. It's not reliable. And people who know the technology know as well that, okay, this is how it works. The machine is learning. So whenever I repeat the questions and get some more maybe new inputs, the answer will vary because there is this fraction of the time where there is more information provided to the machine. So that's why there is a tweak. So I think this is where there's as well the education part with the stakeholders and the discussion around, okay, what are the risks of this? Because sometimes there are questions or the business related elements that you would like, okay, I really need to have the same answer every time you ask, which again, it's not necessarily the strong part at the moment for the artificial intelligence. So having that visibility for the stakeholders, what is the good use case for it and what is maybe not yet there, is very important. So there is also like easier management of the expectations and again, easier way of introducing them to what it can do and how it can help going forward.
Yeah, I would imagine also trade-offs like that probably is a big topic as well, because anytime, I mean, AI aside, just anytime you're reprioritizing, anytime you're shifting anything in the roadmap, it would be nice for us to add new things in and not expect anything to change. But that's just not reality, right? Like if you're adding something, something's got to drop. What was that a big part of those conversations as well? I'm just curious, what the reaction was when it comes to thinking about how to deal with things that would be falling off because you're adding on.
Yeah, actually, my particular product was one of the first in my organization to adapt artificial intelligence solution. In our particular case as well, it was, I believe, I don't remember, it was January or February, a couple of years back, so very early on. And that was as well the period where, hey, we actually had a nicely fresh, done, signed off, budgeted roadmap. So that was very interesting to basically present the opportunity to the stakeholders and show them, okay, can we do that experiment? Because it was relatively cheap, meaning the solution itself could bring a lot of value, but implementation was, I don't want to say straightforward because it was new technologies, still people need to learn, but it wasn't very labor intense. So business was, okay, we can sacrifice one of the smaller things to do the one-off experiment and see how it goes. And here as well, the product analytics come into the picture. We actually used a lot of product analytics data to then see if that new change that we introduced actually moved the needle or not. And we discovered that actually it was very well received by our end users. and the numbers were showing, okay, that is picking up very well. So maybe it's a time to have the conversation. Are we now, after the small experiment, trying to move the needle even more and looking through the entire roadmap and like reprioritizing it with the new and at least, maybe some tweaks, basically just to figure out the spectrum of changes we want to do based on that initial experiment. And I think this is what would be my advice to like anyone who would like to do the changes. In case you have commitments, try to find something which is relatively small that you can run the experiment on and collect as much data as possible on the usage, collect the user feedbacks, and see if this is something worth then to bring to your stakeholders to say, hey, by the way, this is the outcomes. If we do this, we might get that flow going even better, and again, bring more value to the business.
Yeah, that's a great reminder. I mean, we need to, any kind of idea that we might have, how do we validate that? How do we incorporate data into the decision, especially when, we're talking to stakeholders that might have their own opinions on something. If it's just one opinion versus another opinion, those can be sometimes difficult conversations. Usually it turns into like, okay, highest paid person in the room, whoever that is, we'll go with their opinion. But when you're using data and you have data to come in and sort of back up the conversation, that changes things. So I think it's a great reminder. As you think back about that process that you went through, well, I guess first of all, how did things end up? You made this shift. You introduced this to the stakeholder. You said, "Hey, believe we should be making a change. We should be incorporating AI into this, whereas maybe it wasn't going to be incorporated before." How did things end up? Did things end successfully like you had hoped?
Yeah, basically we adopted the AI and then moved towards more features to which incorporate AI. And I think here I also want to add on like discussions with the stakeholders in general. I think, and again, that's my observation from like 15 years working in the industry. And it's just frequently we speak different languages. And even product people tend to be very technical in the conversation, even if they don't have technical backgrounds, because a lot of people who I know who work in product, they come from business, but then they kind of sing in that jargon. And as well, we are getting very excited about the new ideas, and we see that, oh, we actually can bring amazing outputs with using that particular technology. But because we start speaking the solutions, it's frequently difficult for stakeholders to catch up and see, oh, why this matters to me, why I should bother. And even if we actually bring then a conversation to more, hey, by the way, this is the measurements, this is what was our company goals, this is what was the goals for the product, and we can actually drive it faster using this, then it changes the conversation. It's easier for people to grasp and understand, oh, okay, this is where I'm looking at, this is the dots I'm connecting. And even if people have roadmap with commitments, the same, bringing a bit more understanding to, oh, by the way, we can still make those commitments, maybe slightly different route that we initially planned. And this will be the data that supports that journey that we're going forward. Because again, I know that we all would love to live in the ideal world where stakeholders are looking just so like output oriented roadmap and say, yeah, that's blessed. But in practice, I know that frequently there is some roadmap that is signed off by finance and like multiple people looking at it. And some people are very particular because that was this word and not this word. And that feature doesn't pass this word. So I think bringing that data into the picture to say, okay, well, maybe that's a different word, but then you can actually get more out of it, helps people to have that conversation. And then rather than speaking about the opinions, you start speaking about the facts. And that's very, very good transition, because then the conversation is just easier.
Yeah, I like that's a great reminder. Is there anything you would have done differently? If you look back at the process, sounds like things ended well for sure, but these processes that we go through anytime we're making a big change, usually there's always situations where we're like, oh, wish I could have done X, Y, and Z a little bit differently. Might have made it even better. Anything that comes to mind for you that our viewers here might benefit from?
Yes, I would and again, just disclaimer that probably every situation and every product is definitely different. But in our particular case, I think that we could be a bit more, let's say, descriptive in what that thing is, because we did this, let's say, POC, and let's name it like basically small feature. We've thrown it into the tool, and people start using it, but there was also like a lot of questions. Well, what is that? So basically, conjunction of relatively new technology and like counting on that people will just self-discover. I think this is where I was like, okay, probably we should have think through a bit more like how we are showing it to the people and embedding it in more like I don't know, descriptive way in a sense, because we think, oh yeah, people will figure it out. But to my comment about like the stakeholders not being necessarily the most technical, we need to remember that users frequently, when looking at our tools, they might have different tech savviness. So throwing at them a new shiny technology might require a bit of more hand holding to make it just easier and more digestible for them. And I think this is where I think that is worth to like sometimes ponder on while we're thinking on the like particular implementation detail, I would say.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I like that. All right, well, I'll ask you one final question. This is usually sort of my last question in every conversation I have, almost like a lightning round question. It's like maybe the quick hit answer, the first thing that comes to mind. But if there's one big takeaway that you hope people get from this episode, what would you want it to be? And I ask that because we're learning a lot here for sure, but sometimes it's that last thing we hear that stands out. So what would you want that one big takeaway to be?
I would say don't be afraid to pivot. And reason being, if you don't experiment, if you don't pivot when new technology is coming along, there'll be someone else who will. And that person will be just better because they will adopt it faster. And because they will be better, the entire organization most likely will be better. And then you are in the spiral of catching up. So I think pivots, don't be afraid to have a small experiments. And if they fail, because it was small, there's usually low risk connected with it. So that I think that would be one key takeaway from my side.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, it's all great advice. Thank you so much for joining here and spending the time with us. I really appreciate it, Kasia.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It was very nice talking to you.
Yes, and thank you everybody for joining us for this as well. Again, a big thank you goes out to Pendo for helping make this series possible. Again, they are improving the world's experience with software, and they've been doing that for quite some time. So again, thank you, Pendo, and thank you just everybody for tuning in, taking the time out of your day to join us for this. I appreciate it, and I will see you at the next episode.